Hello, I'm Odell Borg. I'm here to teach you about the cedar flute you just got. The interesting aspect of the flute is that it's a very ancient instrument. The Native Americans had this flute for thousands of years, and like all tribal cultures throughout the world, they really did not have a written music language. And it's important to note that because for you as a beginner player, you don't need to know anything about music or music education or how to read music or know the notes to be able to play this instrument. Now, most of you will either have a 5-hole flute or a 6-hole flute. These flutes are based on a pentatonic scale. We call it a pentatonic scale now. It's been around, it's one of the ancient scales throughout the world. And it's based on 5 notes, penta meaning 5. The magic about this particular scale is that all the notes are completely harmonic with each other. So in other words, no matter what you play, it sounds great. On a 6-hole flute, there is an extra hole, which is the 3rd hole from the top, meaning the mouthpiece, and that note is out of the pentatonic scale, and it has a little bit more of a dissonance to it. It's not quite as melodic. You have to learn how to use it, okay? So in the beginning, I would recommend you keep that hole closed. When I make my flutes, I tend to take a leather strip and I tie it over the 3rd hole from the top to keep it closed until you're ready. Then you take it off, slide it off, and start using that hole. That hole has to be, that particular note comes more from memory. When you start to play it, you go, okay, this note works well with this, and you start to play it that way. When you are using a 5-hole flute, you don't have to use memory. You could just play and have fun with it. Each flute is made in a particular key. The flute that I'm playing today is in the key of A. And your flute, when you look at it, on the back side on the bottom, will have a slight circle, a small circle, and we'll have a letter in there, A, G, F sharp, and that is the key of the flute that you own. It's not important to you right now, but it may be later on when you play with other instruments or you play with another flute player, and you'll say, well, what flute are you playing? What key is it in? You'll be able to refer to the flute that tells you right on the back what it is. Now, the most important thing about playing the flute, the hardest thing actually, is to make sure all the holes are closed. And the way you achieve that is to use the flat part of your fingers, the meaty part of your finger. And just place the fingers right over the hole and put a slight amount of pressure on it. Avoid using the tip of the fingers because they do not seal the holes as well. So play a little bit more flat-fingered. Okay, how to hold the flute is also important. It doesn't make any difference whether you put your left hand on top or your right hand on top. What is important is the hand that's on top will have to use the 3rd finger, which you use your index finger in the top hole, 2nd finger will go on the 2nd hole, and then the 3rd finger goes on the empty space between the 2nd and 3rd hole on the 5-hole flute. It's a larger space, and I want that finger to rest there. It's important to do that. Because when all the holes are open on the flute, that's the finger that supports the flute, the 2 thumbs on the bottom and that finger. If you don't put it there, you'll figure it out real fast because your flute will have a tendency to fall out of your hand. Now, when you have all the holes closed, here's the sound the flute should make. If one of the holes is just slightly open, this is the sound you'll get. And we're talking about as just a slight opening, okay? So even though it looks like the holes are closed, the slightest gap will create a screechy sound. Now, for the most part, it's very easy to close the holes, except for the last 2 holes, especially the last one at the bottom. That you have to stretch your finger a little bit, and we're not used to doing that, so you might have a little bit of a problem closing it, and you have to stretch that tendon. It'll take a day or 2, but you'll get used to it. Another way of doing that, if you're having problems with getting the holes closed, is get in front of a mirror so you can see which hole is slightly open. The mirror is also important because it allows you to really see what you're doing, because if you look down, you can't see anything anyway. Now, I also recommend on how to place the flute on your mouth, and we call that an embouchure, is to close your mouth, place the flute right against the closed lips, then open your mouth slightly and take the lower lip and cradle it underneath the flute and allow the upper lip to partially close the hole of the flute, the air hole. And then take the lower lip and seal it, okay? Meaning that the lower lip just wraps around the bottom of the flute and seals the opening altogether, I mean the closure of your mouth on the flute. But so your upper lip is controlling the opening. What that will help with later on is the amount of moisture that goes in the flute, which we'll talk about, and what will it really work with is the techniques that we're talking about later on. It'll really will make the techniques of tonguing and fingering much easier. Now I'd like for you to go ahead and practice just playing up and down the scale. Make sure the holds are closed and go up and down.